Welcome to this new tutorial. Today we're going to do normal baking of high and low poly objects from Blender to Substance. This is a process that can be a bit tricky and give you pretty ugly results if you do it the wrong way. So we're doing this really convenient and nice way that will give you really nice and really smooth bakes. So let's jump right into it. This is my low polygon object in Blender, and this is my high poly. Now, as you can see, right now, they're still not joined, but if I would actually join them and then throw them like that into Substance and bake into Substance Painter, we would get a lot of normal errors, right? Especially in these areas where we have topology near to each other, right? So this thing would actually bake some ugly cylindrical shape stuff on this face. So of course you can clean this up manually in Substance, but there's also a very nice and clean way to get rid of this problem. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna split our mesh into parts. So we have our low poly, it's one object, and we have our high poly. This is currently made in different objects. I had this before because of the workflow thing when modeling, but we can actually just go on and use this, because if you just hide these parts for a moment, like these buttons, and just have that one, this will give us a nice bake. If you just bake that, there's like no overlapping, nothing is too near to each other. It will just be a really good bake. The second part here is actually okay, but it would also already give us quite some problems. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna select in edit mode this part and that part and that part, and press P and say selection, and that will separate them, because if we bake that one, no problem, nothing is too near to each other. Same for that one, nothing is too near. So that's a good separation. Then we have all these buttons. They are actually okay. They are going probably to do some artifacts on these parts here. They are actually still in the subdivision surface modifier, but they all have the same one. So I'm going to join them. So let me actually get rid of these subdivision surface modifiers. That's great. And now we're going to separate every second one, so we don't have any problems when baking normals here. So that one, they will be fine. Let's actually do it nevertheless. And that one as well. Press P to separate the whole thing. And now we're actually the really safe way. So now we actually have this all separated, and that will already give us a really good bake. For the whole thing to work, we actually need to name them in a specific way. So let's start with the body part, and let's call it part 1 underscore HP, right? HP for high poly. The part 1 is actually, can be anything. You can also say object 1, object 2, object 3, whatever. The underscore HP is the important part. So that's like the label for Substance. So we'll know that's a HP model. Then we're going to take the handle. Let's call this part 2 HP. Then we have these parts, part 3 HP. Then we have this, part 4 HP. And we have part 5 HP. So like these are our high poly parts, right? Now we can actually open up our low poly and repeat the same naming and separation for this thing. So as you go to edit mode, deselect everything, press 2 for edge selection, and then select just the body part. So we have that separated. Then press P, separate selection. And then we're gonna call this guy part 1 LP for low poly. You can already hide that. Part 2 was, if I remember correctly, you can just double check and see, okay, what was the part 2 mesh? Yeah, okay, that was this long thing and these 2 screws. So let's do that. Select that part, and that part. P, selection, and let's call it part 2 LP. Now we have these parts, 1 and 2, and just say P, separate, and call them part 3 LP. Now we just gotta make sure we're gonna do the right thing. So part 4 is every second button. So let's actually go on and do that. So that one, that one, that one. I just got to double check already. There's that one, right? That one, that one, that one, that one, and that one, and this one. And then there's also still one on the right side here. It's a small one, like that. And then we just do P, separate, and call this part 4 LP. And then everything what's left is the part 5 LP. Now let's just double check if you did it all right. Part 1, part 1. That looks good. Part 2, part 2. That looks great as well. Part 3, part 3. Yep, correct. Part 4, part 4. Oh, we did a little thing that's not correct. So the HP actually only has that, while the low poly has that. It's exactly the other way around. The rest though is the same. So let's actually, let me just do it right. Yeah, let's deselect, select that one, separate that one, and join it with 5. And then select these two, separate them, and join them with 4. And that way we should have it correct. 4, 4. That looks very good. Part 5, part 5. Yeah, that's all correct. Cool, now that's the separation. Actually pretty easy to do. Now that this is all separated, we can actually go into one last thing before we export this. Let's make the low poly small and we see the high poly. So just make sure all of them are like actually smoothed out. I think they're not in my case. They are not smooth shaded. So let's select them, say smooth. Select all of them, that's a quicker one, say smooth. So now they're like all smooth shaded, so the baking will actually look really good. We got to do the same for the low poly, that's very important. If you don't do that, you get very ugly edges. So select everything, shade smooth. That looks really bad like that, I see this. But you will see in a minute actually for what this is for. Maybe also just double check really quick if all the normals are on the right thing. So you can go here and check face orientation. Yep, that looks good. No normals are flipped. Now comes the export process. Let's take all the low poly objects, say file, export, FBX, and just throw them in here as, I just call it radio underscore LP, mesh selected objects. And then we just do the same for the HP. Select all the HP parts, file, export, FBX, and then we just gotta call this radio HP. That takes sometimes a bit because of a lot of polygons, and that's it. Let's jump over to Substance. Alright, that was the more annoying part, although it's still pretty easy. Now comes the fun part. Let's create a new file in Substance Painter. We're gonna choose Unreal Engine 4 as my template because this asset is for an Unreal Engine 4 game. Document resolution 2K, that's all fine. Now spin, OK. Takes a bit, and now you'll actually see the radio in one part. It looks really bad because it's on smooth shading. It looks bad until you bake the normals. So let's actually bake the normals. Go to your texture set settings, go to bake mesh maps, set the output size to 2K, untick the ID map, you don't need that. Now select your HP, and now comes the important part. Match by mesh name. And now we have these suffixes. So we have chosen HP and LP. So you can also do something else. You can also do low and high. You just want to make sure you go to the same naming in Blender or in your 3D software. Low poly mesh suffix would be LP in our case. High poly mesh suffix is HP. All right, let's start building these maps. And that's it. That's the bake. As you can see, the bake is very, 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 very clean. We don't have any errors right here. Not even on these parts where we have parts very near to each other, because Substance uses them as separated pieces. That's why the bakes actually look that good, and you don't have to do any manual normal editing afterwards. Yes, I think this bake is actually absolutely wonderful. Alright, well, that was it with this little tutorial. This is the part of the series I'm doing. The next part is texturing this whole thing in Substance Painter, and then the part after that is bring this mesh into Unreal Engine 4 and make it actually look good in that program. I've also made a modeling tutorial which is like 1 hour long. This is for our patrons only. So yeah, you can also join our Patreon. For $6 a month you would already get this file here, all the project files, Substance files, Blender files, and you get like a 1 hour tutorial of me modeling this whole thing with a lot of useful modeling tips. That's it for this video. See you next time, and take care everyone.